Thanks, Chair, and thanks for allowing me to participate today in this important discussion, which really should be centered around public safety and making Canada a safer place versus, in my opinion, measures and the amendment in particular that has been table dropped at the last moment on this Bill C-21 that was focused on a handgun freeze that has now turned into an amendment that is focused on arguably the most law-abiding demographic in Canada. In fact, statistics show that firearms owners are 3 times less likely to commit a crime than the average Canadian. But in particular, in my riding of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, I'm here to defend them. This is a huge issue in my neck of the woods. I had my own brothers, friends of mine that I don't even know if many of them have a speeding ticket in their life, that just harvested 3 deer during hunting season just a few weeks ago, and every single one of them is impacted by this ban because they all own hunting rifles that are semi-automatics with detachable magazines. As well, I'm just not here speaking on their behalf and the constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. I've had so many law enforcement officers reach out to me and critique the fact that they do not believe anything within this bill, C-21, and even especially with the amendment now, is going to do anything to actually reduce gun crime and gun violence in this country, and it's focused on the wrong aspects. As well, I'm hearing from veterans and even current members of the Canadian Armed Forces that feel the same way, and I would challenge every member, as I've done in previous interactions or interjections, to talk to some of the PPS that protect us so well and keep us secure here in Parliament. They feel the same way. So this isn't just me. I will offer a point of appreciation. I actually think that we do need to have a discussion around proper definitions around what is, the classification of firearms. This is something that the gun community has been calling for decades, a complete review, but a proper review with all proper consultation. We heard the minister speak during a media scrum, Minister Manicino, just a couple days ago, that said he's been consulting with everybody, and I'm going to get to that because, to me, we should be basing every discussion, every decision around firearms in this country around data and evidence, not political science. It's got to be based on the facts. But something else I'd like to point out, Mr. Speaker, is just go back to my predecessor, the Honourable Larry Miller, Member of Parliament for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, for 15 years. In the 42nd Parliament, he actually tried to solve some of this. He introduced a bill, Bill C-230, an act to amend the Criminal Code, firearm, the definition of a variant, to try to get some clarity around this. Unfortunately, it did not get past second reading because the Liberals, except for one Liberal MP, the NDP and the Bloc all voted it down. It didn't even get a chance to actually be studied here at committee and get through. But again, this is something we've been calling for decades, is the proper classification of firearms. So we're going to get into that here right now. I've been asking questions literally since the first few months of being elected in 2019 to then Minister Blair, and since to Minister Manicino. I've been doing submitted written questions through to try to get some clarity on what the data is, especially around some of the stuff, and in particular to this clause speaking about military-style assault rifles. And again, for the record, I think everybody in this room knows, I spent 25 and a half years in the Canadian Armed Forces as an infantry officer. I've carried fully automatic firearms and handguns pretty much my whole career. I've slept with a fully automatic firearm as a pillow, fully loaded, 30-round magazine on it, round up the spout in Afghanistan, and the gun never went off. Guns do not kill people. People kill people, not the firearms themselves. So I guess I have a question here to the officials. In particular, when I asked a question back around shortly after the OIC came out, which is what this amendment sort of is now legislating, is what those firearms that were banned, the over 1,500 models at that time. I asked specifically what was the formal technical definition of an assault-style firearm at that time, and when did the government first use it? They refer to, and I just want to verify, the consultation process and the report that was provided to the government. Is that the The Hilton-Knowlton Commission report, Reducing Violent Crime, a Dialogue on Handguns and Assault-Style Firearms. Is that the report that's being referred to?
Thank you for the question. The report, the consultation report, is available up on Public Safety's website. And if you prefer, we can send a link to the clerk.
So that's a different report than this one?
I'm sorry, I don't know the title of the report offhand.
All right. Well, anyway, that's the report the Public Safety and the Parliamentary Secretary at the time, Joel Lightbound, signed off on and referred to it, is that they were choosing, to use that principle. So I just want to share, if this committee, I'm sure everybody that's been studying this has gone through some of it, but it was actually a fairly significant and detailed consultation process. So I'm just going to cover a little bit out of the executive summary there about what some of the key themes that were received based on the submissions from a number of Canadians right across the base. In fact, there was over 1,200 written submissions. That's a lot of information, a lot of data and evidence that we should be taking into consideration. And they did an online questionnaire that with over 134,000 Canadians that participated in and provided the data. So here's the key themes that came out of those written submissions. Rightfully so, there was a mixed reaction to the potential of banning or limiting access to firearms. However, broad consensus about the need to collect relevant data on crime involving firearms, addressing the risk factors underlying firearms violence, focus on the illicit firearms trafficking, enhance enforcement capacity, consult with the firearms community and industry, provide more mental health supports and screening, provide more education.
I'm sorry, Mr. Van Bynen, on a point of order?
Yes. Has this report been submitted to committee, or are we just reading off any old article we want to read off?
It's his debate. He can read what he likes, basically.
I'm more than willing to table this if it's not already at committee, Chair. We can do that after the fact. I can even leave the printed hard copy here for the clerks. Provide more education on safe and secure storage, address the impact of gun violence on women, and provide clarity.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair.
On a point of order, Mr. Nur Mohammed.
Is evidence on this now not closed? Is it acceptable for the member to submit it to table the report in clause by clause?
We're past that stage. However, the member may use the information he wants, as long as he stays pertinent to the amendment at hand.
That's what I'm talking about, Chair. And if again, I'm not too worried. It was Mr. Van Bynen that was asking about the report. So if you don't want me to give it to the committee itself, if that's somehow against the rules, I'm more than willing to email it to every single member of the committee so you can read it for your own viewing pleasure. So again, I just want to continue on here in particular about some of the key things around the relevant data and the classification. Because one of my questions back to the minister, when I asked about this, about the definition, was where is it defined? And again, it points to this report. If you read this report, it actually states quite clearly the government really needs to define this. So here we are 2.5 years later, bringing forth the definition at the last minute with no feedback or consultation on the exact definition that now has been brought forward. In fact, we're doing it here at a clause-by-clause review versus without actually hearing evidence and testimony from all the relevant stakeholders, etc. So
Point
I
of
just
order,
want
Mr.
to, again...
Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Sorry.
Mr. Nur Mohammed, on a point of order.
The member made a statement in respect of consultation. Did we not hear from the firearms lobby? Did we not hear from the police? Did we not hear from victims? I just want to be clear that we are being honest in terms of the information that's being provided. I just want to make that clear.
I do believe that's debate and not a point of order. So,
But I guess as a rebuttal there, Mr. Chair, I believe that you likely did hear from them in reference to the original Bill C-21, which was a handgun freeze, not on this amendment. The government has now tabled an amendment that significantly changes the scope of this bill. I know that was debated at the first portion, the first committee meeting where you did that. I don't want to get into the debate about scope or not scope, but my point is it's relevant information about the fact is that the government's now introduced, through a table drop amendment, a fundamental change to what the bill is about, and we haven't had that appropriate consultation. But regardless, let's go.
These amendments not submitted.
Mr. Van Bynen, on a point of order.
Were these amendments not submitted in accordance with process? Did we not meet the guidelines for the requirements?
All
for these
amendments were in fact submitted appropriately.
So it's not just a table drop amendment it's being referred to.
Again,
it's
this
an
sounds
amendment
like
that was
debate,
submitted.
but we'll carry on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll get back to about some of the unsolicited submissions that went into this report. 65%, 64.84% of the submissions that were received in providing this public consultation to the government opposed any further limitations on firearms. Let's get into the online questionnaire portion of it. As I said, over 130,000 Canadians provided feedback, with roughly just under half of them not owning a firearm, right? Or less than half that indicated they owned a firearm. Let's see what they said about, should more be done to limit access to handguns? 81% of the total submission said no, right? That was specifically on handguns. Again, here's a very misleading question, I would argue, and we got this from testimony when I was at this committee a little while back, and I was able to ask a question to one of the lawyers, done to limit access to assault weapons. So again, very badly worded question. Assault weapons, as we know, are not properly defined in a legal sense. They are defined from a technical sense. An assault weapon is a firearm that is select fire capable and fully automatic. But anyway, should more be done to limit access to that? Again, 130-some thousand Canadians. 77% of them, no. That is the response. So again, this is the data that the government got themselves on the need to reduce gun violence. However, where are some positive measures that can be taken? Should more be done to limit handguns and other firearms in the illicit market, in which the following areas should be focused? Smuggling, 86% of them, 100%. Let's go after the illegal firearms and the illegal trafficking of those firearms. There's more in there. I'm not going to waste more time on going through this report, but again, this is the data, the consultation that the government refers to that was done in gathering their evidence. The other thing that was referred to is some of the public consultations. I'll give Mr. Blair credit. He showed up in my riding before I was even elected, as I was in the midst of transitioning out of the military and joining this illustrious place, if that's what we call it, and I attended that public consultation in my riding in the village of Durham, town of Durham, and I can speak quite honestly that there wasn't a single person that interjected in that 2-hour-plus roundtable that had anything positive to say about anything that the government was even discussing or proposing. I do give Mr. Blair credit. He took it fully on the chin for a couple hours, and I do give him credit for at least showing up to it. Where do I want to go next, Mr. Speaker? Let's get back to the prohibition, because again, that's where some of the definition goes and where specifically these amendments were listed. In that, and I asked this question again of the government's part of that OPQ that I submitted, and one of the aspects of it was, how did you come up, how was the list determined? Under what sort of functionality or capabilities? My understanding, the answer that I received at the time was there was no characteristics or functionality to come up with that list. There was sort of 3 key principles. Is that a fair assumption of what those that it was principles, not actual functionality or capability of the firearms?
So for the May 1st, 2020 OIC,
Yes.
the criteria that was set out in the regulatory impact analysis statement said that there were three aspects which were considered in establishing the list. The first is that the firearm be semi-automatic with sustained rapid-fire capability, and that was meant to include tactical, military-designed firearms with large magazine capacity.
So we'll just pause it there,
Okay.
that first one, because
Yep.
that's exactly what I want to address. High sustained rate of fire for a semi-automatic. Is that not somewhat of a contradictory statement, considering the rate of fire of a semi-automatic is controlled by the shooter and how fast they can actually pull the trigger. If it's a fully automatic, 100%. Pull the trigger, rounds go off as fast as the firearm can cycle and recoil and put the next round down range. However, a semi-automatic's rate of fire is completely controlled by the shooter. It has nothing to do with the firearm, unless you want to get into the technical aspects about how much pressure, trigger pressure, et cetera, which is not even part of this discussion.
So I think your question's an important one, and I hope I don't come across as like dismissing it, but these were the parameters that were set out in the regulatory impact analysis statement, and then these were the principles that were used to guide the determination of what was listed in the OIC. So the technical aspects of each firearm were examined by the Canadian Firearms Program, and it would probably, when we go down into a granular discussion, it would be helpful to the committee to have representatives from the Canadian Firearms Program to answer questions for you about specific firearms and the more technical questions as well.
Couldn't agree more. Now,
Right.
with that principle as well, that first principle that you identified, large magazine capacity, I just want to make sure it's on the record, everybody here in the committee understands. Magazines for long guns of greater than 5 rounds have been illegal in Canada since 1992. Do I have the date right?
Yes, you did.
Yes, good. All right. Second principle. What's the second principle?
Oh, so the second one is that it had to be of modern design,
And so, can you please explain what modern design is for the committee?
post-World War II.
Post-World War II, right?
Post-World War
So as long as the firearm is 80 years or 70-plus years or newer, we should ban it. That's basically one of the principles that were used to come up with the list.
Right, there's the 3 criteria, and all 3 criteria had to be met in order to be included on the list.
Perfect. And 3, what was the third one?
Large, like a significant presence in the market.
Present in large volumes in the Canadian market.
Right.
So I guess let's just ask a logical question, and again, maybe it's a little rhetorical, Chair. If there's 100,000 of firearm X, one of the firearms that are listed here, they've been used in 0 gun crimes in Canada, but they meet the other 2 principles. It's now banned and being added to this list, or potentially has been put on this list, correct?
So the list is determined by these 3 criteria,
3.
and whether or not a specific firearm has been used to commit an offense is
Got it.
not one of the. Right.
So it could be on the list, 100,000 of them in Canada, never used in a gun crime, but it meets these 3 principles. I don't want to use the word criteria because my understanding criteria is never used in here at all. It's 3 principles. However, in a sort of a separate situation, we could have firearm Z. There's only 10 of them in Canada. All 10 of them have been used in gun crimes in Canada, but they don't necessarily, there's no guarantee they're going to be on the list, even though they might have been responsible for killing lots of people. Correct?
So as I indicated, the list for the May 1st OIC was based on these physical, or these capacity, the technical capacity of the firearms to discharge ammunition in a sustained way. Whether or not a specific firearm is used to commit offenses was not a criterion for establishing the list.
So another thing that the government's used, and it's been brought here in testimony, is that these firearms were designed by soldiers for use by soldiers. One of the questions I've asked the minister previously is, out of the list now, and we're almost, I would argue, over 2,000 different models and variants if we include the OIC from May the 1st, plus the new list here that we're debating now that's been included in this amendment. So how many of these firearms that are currently listed, there's over 2,000 of them, have been used by the Canadian Armed Forces ever in the past or currently?
I don't have that information. This would be information that could be provided to you perhaps by the Canadian Firearms Program. So I would invite you to submit that question.
Well, I asked the minister almost 2 years ago or a year and a bit ago, and unfortunately, I guess he didn't determine it was worth answering.
I thought the witnesses were here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Van Byn, on a point of order. I'm sorry, what was
Yes,
the
I
point?
thought the witnesses were here to answer technical questions and not speculate on other items.
Well, that is a technical question, Chair. I'm asking out of the
Number
list that
the
was
number of
provided.
people,
So-
the number of people that.
So
use
thank you,
this.
Mr. Van Bynen. So it is true that the witness is here to answer technical questions. They're not here to speculate or conjecture on policy matters. Questions you may have asked the minister would be kind of not necessarily in their purview. And I know that we've all kind of, both sides have been kind of pushing that limit a little bit here. But let's, out of respect for the witnesses, let's kind of keep into their proper lane. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I mean, that's why I asked the question. It was a specific question around out of the list of firearms that has been brought forward. One of the criteria in the discussion that the government's continued to use is that these are military firearms. And as somebody that's with past experience that's been involved in reviewing, helping draft statement of requirements and specifications for firearms in the Canadian Armed Forces, there's not very many of them here that I would support or even support purchasing by the Canadian Armed Forces because they're not appropriate for military use. There are a couple on the list. I think, well, at least one that I could determine from trying to read through one of the sniper rifles that the Canadian military is currently using. But again, that doesn't get into this variant or into the specifics around the definition aspect. But there is a sniper rifle, a bolt-action sniper rifle, right, that is listed here, not a firearm. And again, I would clarify or just point that out that it's not one of the ones that meets on the semi-automatic side of the house.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Nur Mohammed on point of order.
If the member could specify what he's talking about, which weapon he's talking about, that would be helpful to the debate.
Yeah, the
That
Prairie
is
Gun Works timber.
point of
It's on the list. Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, I'll just leave my comments here. I'm sure I do want to get back. Unfortunately, I got another commitment I have to get to. However, I just want to state that I really think going forward, it would be beneficial for this committee on this specific amendment to actually hear from law enforcement, hear from the RCMP, Canadian Firearms Program, from the experts, hear from the stakeholders in industry, because I think fundamentally this amendment changes what the purpose of this bill was interested in, and it would be to everybody's value so we get this right going forward. I'll leave my comments at that, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Before the honourable member leaves, just to
Sorry,
clarify.
wait a minute. Thank you, Mr. Ruff. And on a point of order, Mr.
Thank you,
Nur
Mr. Chair.
Mohammed.
Just before the honourable member leaves, just to clarify that the weapon he's talking about has actually been prohibited for 2.5 years since 2020, so he shouldn't be concerned about it being on this
Thanks.
list.
That's a point of debate as well.